Welcome to episode 7 of the Neat Cast. I'm really thrilled today to host Katie Burke, who goes by the name Katie Be Happy online. And I have had the great pleasure of knowing Katie for a year or so now, and she's the founder of the Global Be Inspired movement. And I'm just so lucky and honored to also be in her yoga classes that are very grounded in neuroscience. So, welcome, Katie. Thanks for taking the time to do this with us today while your little one is asleep. And love everything that you teach us and ground us on a weekly basis. And yeah, so the NEATcast mostly has featured scientists, and to me, you're actually an everyday scientist, even though you may not have a neuroscience PhD in your resume. But I really want to hear about your journey and tell the people who you are.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate this kind of aspect because I would never think of myself to be on a podcast of neuroscience, but I really do respect and look forward to every week working with those and how it integrates into movement, into yoga. I started my yoga journey, as I think a lot of people do, when they're just kind of lost and looking for good stuff in their life, whether it was a breakup or an injury, and you kind of find your yoga mat. But then as I was thinking about really where the interest peaked for me before even I hit my yoga mat, I was thinking about how when I was young, I started to notice that there's different languages that people speak from their body. So the way that we breathe is a language, right? The way we hold space. If life excites you or if life takes your breath away, good or bad, I started to think about the language of even just how we hold our posture, like body language, or the languages of nature. I lived on a 20-acre farm in the middle of nowhere, so I didn't have a lot of real people friends. I grew up with a big imagination, just like running around and making things up. And all my favorite trees had names. They talked to me. So nature has its own language, the way you listen to the ocean. Then I started to think, okay, if I was really into these different languages and how we hold space, it's also really nervous system regulation, right? My mom sadly passed away when I was 14 and she was 43. She died of breast cancer. And I had the unique opportunity to be with her in her last breaths. And so I hope that everyone gets that at some point in their life because, when her organs were slowly shutting down, she was in hospice. We knew it was the end. We saw her chest kind of rise and fall, inhaling and exhaling, and then it slows down. So this is a familiar thing towards the end of life if this is the way that you leave your body. And the very last, let's say, hour, the breaths were like 30 seconds, 50 seconds apart. They were like, oh, is this the last one? Is this the last one? And she, on the very last exhale, she sat straight up, and some say it's the rush of adrenaline, uh, the DMT, who knows? We don't exactly know, but some people sit straight up. And to me, it looked like she flew out of her head. And then she fell back down and she hadn't sat up in like 3 days. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe that's really when my interest in what this breath or what the inhales and exhales mean started. Because that's what yoga is, right? Yoga is the unification of your mind, body, and your breath. But really, it started when I saw someone take their last exhale. And I was like, whoa, if my beautiful mom, vice president of the Camera Shop Incorporated, this like very powerful, loving woman, could just like inhale and then exhale, and there was nothing left. I just went on a big quest. And I do think that my soul was just, it chose this journey to figure out how do we make the most of each inhale. And inhale in Latin, the Latin root is inspira. So part of my company and the retreats that I do is called Be Inspired because we're trying to figure out why we get another inhale. And every second, 1.8 people stop breathing. They get their last exhale, right? We don't know why it comes and why it goes. So I know that it started there, but the real like asana based part of it came when I moved out to San Diego. I wanted to get as far away from New Jersey as possible and my family. I love my family, but kids rebel. And I came out to San Diego State, got really interested in international politics. And then as my major was international security and conflict resolution, I started to realize that maybe the change I was looking for wasn't such a political or conflict resolution scale in that way, but actually in the 60 minutes that we got on our yoga mat. I started to teach pretty quickly after I was a practitioner, and starting 2010, I've been teaching pretty much full time since then because there's something that happens from that first minute to that very last minute, no matter how long the practice is. And that's attributed. Now we can see so many people are taking asana, which is great, but we could also put that to any sort of intentional movement too. I'm also a personal trainer. So think about like weight training or, yoga sculpt, which you love, or like even running because it's intentional breathing or biking. That same physicality change that happens in such a short time. Like even before this podcast, I just went out on my son's trampoline and jumped for 10 minutes just to like regulate my nervous system. And it feels good to know that you can do that in yourself. And I hope that as a teacher, I hope that I give that power back to people. We can flood everyone with information, but until you really feel and experience it, I try to both integrate the movement and give you a little bit of the why we start to feel better when we're on our mat, why you start to feel better after a bike ride. And for me, I think yoga is a vehicle at which I found the most peace, especially because of the rest phase at the end. I think no matter what modality of movement you take, they're all wonderful. There is an importance to the down regulation at the end. So, Shavasana, corpse pose, it's about taking some time to let your soul, per se, your head, your mind, your heart, take a break from your flesh suit and to just let your body relax enough that your mind can go wherever it wants to go. You get a break from your body. As long as the movement you take integrates some sort of like rest phase, even if it's like meditation later in the day, that rest phase is equally, if not more important than that high impact kind of crazy movement, right? One of the big things I'm always asking my students to consider is interoception. I don't know, is that an actual neuroscience terminology? I don't even know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
I think everything you've talked about is very neuroscientifically based, and interoception is very important for the brain and mental well being. But yeah, go ahead, tell us more what you think about interoception.
I love the concept of like, can my mind to muscle connection, can the frequency or the messages from my brain to my body get stronger? Because sadly, I had Bell's palsy, and 40,000 people every year in America get it. So I'm not that special, but it is unique how young I was. I was 27 when I got it. And all of a sudden, my brain was telling my face to fire and it was stuck. My eye was stuck open, my mouth was stuck open. I couldn't eat or drink without holding my lips. And it's really messed up that the person they named it after, Bell, when you're paralyzed in your mouth and you can't move your lips, you can't say B or P sounds. So when people be like, "What's wrong?" I feel like I have Bell's palsy, but like I couldn't purse my lips to say it. Just a funny caveat. But when the after that, I started to realize, okay, maybe there's more to the work I can do, even though in that moment I couldn't heal with my mind that exact nerve that was inflamed, but I could get better at that connection. Maybe I was moving too quickly through life, or maybe I was not really listening to some of those pain receptors. That's another language, is pain. Your body is going to give you those messages all the time, right? And that's what movement or yoga like we do, it's a form of communication with that pain, just like interoception. So I'm hoping that through classes and people show up on their mat, they get to investigate, oh, I feel this little pain here. Can my mind get smarter about noticing? Can that connection be smarter of noticing what my body's saying? And then vice versa. Can my mind control it better? And I mean, the Bell's palsy luckily healed within 6 months. It was more of a vanity issue than anything else, right? Because nothing, everything else worked. But I think it was important for me at standing in front of 600 people per week in my classes to just show up still paralyzed and be like, no matter what's going on in your life, you are not alone. All these sad or crazy or big thoughts that we might think we have, you're not alone in that fear. Was I terrified to stand in front of people with my face half broken, a half of a smile working? Totally. But I do think it empowered people to kind of look at me and say, okay, if she can do that, if she can show up to work and still teach talking like this, and I had a pirate patch for some of it, then I think that like whatever those smaller insecurities are, and I don't mean to say small, I mean to say the insecurities that feel big, but when something bigger happens, they feel small, then they can like go through their day a little bit better, a little bit stronger. And one of the beauty of our practice is, can we get better at that communication, the language of pain, the language of our breath, the language of our of holding space, the language of eye contact, the language of like of holding the space with someone that you're proud to know yourself, all of it. And movement's probably one of the oldest languages too, right? Before babies even learn to speak, they point, they crawl, they wiggle, they communicate through their body. And 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 I think silence is the last and most important one for me, is like being able to both move, yes, good for your mind, body, brain. Can we also honor a space where you're not scared to be in your head alone? Luckily, like, well, I don't want to say luckily. I grew up in a generation where I didn't have a smartphone to entertain me. Although I had TV, we watched plenty of TV. I will say that nowadays, when I'm raising my son, he's 20 months, I of course love watching movies and TV, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I wonder how his brain will evolve knowing that there's always something that has an answer. There's always something that can distract him. There's always, right? Silence is a lost form, a lost art form. And I hope that in the yoga classes that we get at least a little bit of that at the end. There's soft music, maybe some affirmations I'm saying in and out, but that stillness and silence is a muscle just like any that we have to rep. I think the biggest lesson I've ever learned in my life is that just like you can't do one squat and have a perky butt the rest of your life, and you can't do one push up and have perky chest and shoulders the rest of your life, you also have to do the reps for your mind and your heart. Like those things get flabby too if we're out of practice. Recently, I just went through a miscarriage, and I definitely noticed that my mind was getting flabby around this idea of putting shame and guilt and fault on myself. And so I had to go back to some basics, like we all do. We have seasons. Went back to some basics, right? Some daily affirmations, 5 minutes of silent meditation in the morning, some of the little things that got me going in the first place. But then once you're on a roll, you kind of get out of those good habits. And then I got flabby in my mind and my heart. And so I've been the past 2 or 3 weeks back in the role again of what are my little tiny habits besides yoga, the little things, like when I'm brushing my teeth, can I look at myself in the mirror and really eye stare, right? When I'm sitting in my car before I go into work, can I sit in my seat, feel the heat warmer, and just say, whatever I need to hear, I'm safe, I'm ready, give myself that love. Because if we get out of those reps, out of practice, that part of us feels out of sync and flabby too, right?
Yeah, so cool. I mean, there's just so much in what you said right now that I'm gonna try to unpack it a little bit. I've been recently I've been learning to be a nature meditation teacher, and so I'm taking classes and just connecting with nature more, and the joy of what you talked about growing up on a farm as a child. I'm actually very jealous of that. I grew up in urban Delhi, which is very chaotic, but my mom has a green thumb and she makes a little oasis garden wherever she goes. So I lived in my little gardens, and I love what you just said about that. Even whatever little green space I have, being able to connect with nature is amazing. And so is what you followed from there is connecting with the breath and with signals from my body, which is what interoception is. And how you very strikingly talked about your experience with your mom leaving the earth, and kind of how fundamental that experience was in learning about the breath. And for the brain, for our listeners who don't know, the breath is, while it's automatically coded in the brainstem, it's automatic, it still has those brainstem centers are very well connected to our parts of our brain that are known for cognitive control. So the specifically what we understand as the insula and the anterior cingulate, these are really the muscles of our brain that help us pay attention, that really help us volitionally control, this is what I want to pay attention to. And the breath centers are highly connected to them. And really, these centers are also what get the interoceptive inputs into the brain. So the breath, and also when in meditation we pay attention to the breath, it's kind of the most convenient anchor because we feel it the most. And once you start practicing that, you can start to notice your body more and your other signals more. And what I also noticed in what you talked about is the sense of awareness of nature, of ourselves, but also of other people and their pain, and that you didn't compare, no matter the fundamentally your what you've been through in life seems like so much, and at the same time when you talk about other people's pain, you don't put a comparator like how little or big it is because for us, how whatever we might be going through, for us in that moment it's a big thing, and to talk about the loss of a loved one like your mom is unimaginable to me. I went through a miscarriage, which was a tough time for me too, and also your Bell's palsy and the way you dealt with it. I'm sure at that time, I didn't know you then, but I'm sure many people were very inspired by just seeing that example, that how can one person go about doing this and how that has moved them. And personally, I went through a very long depressive episode last year, and really coming to your classes in some ways, and we did the affirmations, and we said, this is going to be the best week of my life. That's what we said every day. I was like, here I am, still very depressed, but this is going to be the best week of my life. But now I'm out of it, and it is like what you say. We make it the best week of our life, and we make it the best month of our life. But it's that point, like, okay, I'm not going through a good time right now, but I will not let that muscle get flabby, which you talked about in the end. Like, our brain is a muscle, and our emotion regulation is a muscle. And so
Yeah, and you were out of practice, and then like the more you showed up, whether it was just mine or not,
yeah,
that's the whole point, is like you got to fake it a little bit till you make it, right? We
yeah,
got to get back out of the bad reps. No one loves starting to work out all of a sudden. Like if you haven't worked out in 2 years, those first couple weeks are hard, but once you get the momentum, it changes. But isn't it funny? Like we don't, even though we know this conceptually, we're not always in the practice of keeping ourselves hygienic in that way, right? Like I say, yoga is like brushing your teeth. You don't see the cavities being removed, but you trust that they're preventing them. Well, that's what yoga is, or stretching, or taking the mindful time, or meditation, taking this time to clear out space so that you don't have that nervous breakdown, so that you don't lose your stuff on your family and your friends, so that you have more space for whatever hard does come. Because if there's one thing we know for sure, hard's going to keep coming, but what hard is changes, right? How we handle the load based on, are we going to always be in that fight or flight amygdala kind of thing? Or are we going to like take it back into the control center more and gain control over not just our triggers, but who we are, gain control over, okay, I can't control that this happened, but I can control my reaction to it or how I hold it. I always say like life, people, let's say beginner humans, maybe it's their first go around. These beginner humans, they think life happens to me. And we try to work out of that victimhood and, create space from the thing. But then, a little bit more advanced humans say life happens for me. And that's kind of cool. Like you're looking for the benefit of what was given. My mom died so that I could value my life. I got Bell's palsy so that I can write the story to myself and say, all right, look, I dealt with a facial paralysis and I came out the other side. I still have friends. I still had, a boyfriend or whatever at the time. Like nothing bad happened besides that. I also was able then to kind of have a catalyst to write a book that I had been wanting to write forever. So that kind of was the starting place for that too. But then the third level of human, I think, is that life happens through you, right? Because we know that the way that we see the world is completely in context. Perception is something you can tone that muscle too. We see things as light in the electrical signals, but that's just the visual cortex. Our brain is reconstructing the image of the world, right? Our eyes collect the information, but your brain creates the experience. And so if perception is this active process, that means we actually get to create the world around us. something shitty can happen to like six people in a row. Let's say the same thing. We all get in a car accident at the same time. But the way that our brain holds that space around it, that's what we can change and get better at. Our perception is an active process.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny you talk about that. My PhD was actually on the attentional spotlight and how our brain creates, the images that we see, and on actually illusions, which was, our brain can actually create a process of seeing things that don't actually exist. And technically I worked on these audiovisual illusions. So sounds can create and can make you imagine and see things, and we figured out that those things actually exist in your brain. They're not hallucinations. You're not making it up. There's an actual brain signal saying that there's a visual imprint in the brain and that you actually saw it, but there was really nothing that we showed you. And
Cool.
so, this is what the experiences that you're talking about are really what we see is what we want to see, and the way our brains are wired, not necessarily what's coming through our eyes. And so it's really cool when you talk about, this life is happening through me. And many times I think about, really, if we were to treat ourselves as the messenger between generations, kind of passing the knowledge from past generations, whether it's like the yoga that you teach us, or when I get to do that with my kids, or the meditation practices, or music, or things that I'm learning that are art forms from another time and another expert, and many of them from our past cultures from the East. We're here, but then we're also passing them down, and that's something I'm also curious about is knowing so much. You also, must be raising your little one in a very mindful way. And why I'm curious about that is that we've actually done some work with kids and parents doing co-mindfulness practices, and lo
Mhm.
and behold, that actually changes both brains towards better frontal control. And these were stressed families where the kid actually sadly was diagnosed with cancer, and they were dealing with a lot of stressors. So how can we, promote some self-regulation practices while they go through their treatment journey? But yeah, I want to hear, your, the way I'm thinking about the way you teach, and also the way you might live with your child, and just the way you spread this, this self-regulation journey. I want to hear a little bit more about that, how that touches your personal life now with your child.
Mhm. Well, Ollie is only 20 months, so even though we definitely work on, he's at the point where he says like three words together, four words together, but there'll be moments, of course, tantrums and like moments where, this morning he asked for milk, I gave him milk, he didn't want milk, he threw it across the table, those kind of things. And two parts. Part one is as an adult, I'm now learning how to hold space in my own head and not reacting to whatever tantrum is coming. And that's really important. I think a cool part of being a parent in this generation, there's a lot of tools out there to help you hold space enough and not react in a way that you naturally want to, right? The fight or flight wants to be like, you just asked for milk. But instead, holding that space and just patiently breathing, regulating myself. And then the second part is trying to see life through his eyes, kind of touching on what you said before about the everyone's pain is the biggest thing and the worst thing they've ever felt based on what they've been through. So I'll never forget a boyfriend I had when my mom died. He around the same time his cat of 20 years died. And this is like a 17-year-old kid, and I was like, he was so distraught. And at the time, I didn't have the emotional intelligence, let's say, to understand that that is the worst pain that this man had ever been through. And it feels to the intensity that of my worst pain, right? So, fast forward to some of my son's issues, like when he falls or something didn't go his way, that is the worst pain he's ever felt. And he's experiencing it in a way where I have to be on his level and just sit with him and breathe and understand that this is the biggest thing he's ever felt. And how can I hold space in that way? Yes, we've started some breathing stuff where I say blow out the birthday candle because he gets that, or like blow the bubbles because you can't exhale without an inhale. So as long as you work on the exhales first. Um, but he he does understand like stop, wait, and before you react, take a breath or two. But I don't know if he like fully gets how that's helping him quite yet. He might be a little bit younger. I personally am just geeking out on seeing the world through his perspective. So, going back to like, okay, the same six people get in a car accident. They all have a very different experience of like how it went down. And what's cool, I'd love to read your paper because thinking about, hey, if one person was playing their favorite song as they're going through this car accident, like for me, it's Pitbull. Like, give me everything tonight. Pitbull's playing. I might not feel as like intensely as someone next to me who's maybe not listening to music or who is in their head of thinking about their breakup or whatever's going on separately. And I think about little Ollie thinking like, not having milk or whatever it is the end of the world. So I think, okay, what is his perspective on this? And then backtrack even more. We were in New Jersey 2 weeks ago visiting my family, and it's the first time that Ollie has ever seen like big rain. Because in San Diego, it's like fake rain. So he sees big rain. He puts his hands up and he's like, "Mom, the sky is crying." Yeah. And he's like so excited that he's like catching the rain in his hands. And I thought to myself, that's so weird because the minute I felt rain, my head went to dread. I was like, oh, we're not going to be able to play. Oh, it's going to be hard to drive. Oh, there's going to be traffic. All this like habit loop of the bullshit from the past 39 years of my life that's stacked up there in the story behind the rain. And sweet Ollie teaches me if this is the first time he's feeling rain, how can I re-experience life through those eyes, right? I think my husband just asked me the other day, it's like, why do you think people have kids? Like in a contemplative way, not like, why do we have a kid? But I said, I think it's because, as we get older, we need to remember who we were. We need to see life through their eyes again. And I need to remember what it was like with the innocence and the joy to experience some of the smaller things in a world that has so much pain. We can look at it like pain, or we can look at it as the world is moving in the way that it always was, and we're just experiencing more pain. But with kids in our life, at least for me, I've always loved kids. I'm able to just step back a little bit and see a revitalized, or I'll even say a remembering. I'm remembering what it used to be like. And that's okay. Like I can still be an adult and have my feelings and have my pain, but I'm also given this perspective to not carry some of the stuff that I've been carrying. Like I don't need to sit every time it rains, I don't need to get dread in my heart and be like, oh, driving. Now when I think of rain, I'll be like, oh, the sky's crying, right? Giving yourself a different habit loop or perspective to kind of infiltrate in that prediction machine of your brain.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah, and definitely similar experience of kids really reframing us towards the more positive side of things, and I don't know, resilience just comes to them naturally in some ways, or I guess they have this, naivete which we lose over time, and you bring that back to in your teachings. You bring that back to us again and again. How we can put things in a positive frame when we're tired, our muscles are tired, and yet, how do we keep going through it and thinking about it positively? And sometimes you trick us through some cool brain fact while we're going through, a bazillion lunges, or like, okay,
Yeah.
here comes a brain fact. But it's that is really what resilience is. In one of our next episodes, we're going to talk about some of the brain correlates of resilience, and how people's brains that for people who are more resilient, how their brains function differently, how the brain centers fire differently to positive information versus negative information,
Mm.
and how you learn to actually create a more robust representation of the positive information, or downplay the negatives in some way. But like you said before, that you have to train your brain to do this and to notice what your little one's doing and what he's saying. And these days where everyone's so distracted by their devices that they may not be noticing what you said to your husband about why are there kids in this world, and sometimes people bring in kids to the world but they don't think about what happens next. But it's that's what they're there for, to teach us that life can be looked at in another way. So that's pretty awesome. But speaking about resilience, would you tell us about your book? It's a really beautiful book, and yeah, you told a little bit that it's about your journey from your Bell's palsy days. But yeah, we'd love to tell readers about it. I think it's a very powerful book.
Thanks. Yeah, I when little girls kind of dream about their wedding, I always wanted like I would fake my name on like I'd wrap books and put my name like an author on the side of a book. I always wanted to write. I love writing. I love how language can make us feel connected and make us feel things that we didn't know we could feel based on how it's written. And specifically, this book, it's called Cheers to Chaos: 8 Tools for the Puffy-Eyed and Powerful. It's 8 chapters, each of them a part of a story, a different type of part of my life with a different lesson. So at the end of each chapter, there's something to consider for yourself too. It's like a self-help way where there's also a journal question to consider. But if nothing else, it just reads like a memoir. It's pretty simple. It's 150 pages. On Audible, I read the audiobook and it's only about 4.5 hours long. So it's not that long of a book. But I do feel like for me, the intention that I set behind it was to make people feel less alone in all of the things that we hold in our head. Because the quieter we get about shame and guilt and anxiety, and like speaking now from my miscarriage too, I saw myself getting quieter and not sharing so much and blah, 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 blah. And the more quiet we get about things, the bigger they feel inside of us. But the more you share it, the less it feels. Like the first time you say it out loud, it's scary. And then after that, the more times you say it out loud, it lessens the impact. It reps the muscle in your brain of that shock factor. And the emotion isn't attached to that feeling anymore. So it helped me feel less alone. It helped me feel less shameful, less sad, all the things that I was hoping for, but truly to make people feel less alone in their own grief per se. So it's definitely X-rated. So if you're interested in a fun book, make sure it's, you're ready. That first intro will get you. If you read the first, let's say 6 pages, you'll figure out exactly what the book is like. So it's a very fun time.
So cool, so cool. And yeah, we'll put in a link for it on the podcast, and I'm sure I really would like people to pick it up, and because in any way we can get more of Katie B in our lives, because you're awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I guess we could sort of wrap up there, but one of the last things I wanted to touch on that was a theme recurring through our conversation was sort of the power of community. And yesterday, I was reading this other book and mentioned it was again about resilience, and it had the example of this island of Tuvalu, which is, I don't know if you know about it, but this island is off of the Australian continent, and it's the one of the smallest countries in the world, and it's gonna probably disappear due to climate change by 2050. They were interviewing the people on the island, and the people said, well, they've been telling us that we're going to disappear for a long time, but we haven't. And now the country started taking action, and what they did was it's going to be the first country to be a fully digital nation. So they're mapping out everything that the country has, from the land to the people's loved possessions, to their culture, their scripts, to everything that they ever prize is part of this digital imprint that they're creating. So I love their use of technology, but at the same time, what they're saying is that we'll never leave the island, even though we're going to be, by 2050, maybe we would not exist, because this is where we've always been. This is our community, and this is where we have love, and this is where we have this is where we're grounded. And I feel that so much, that the resilience a lot of times comes with that power of community, and that we connect to others, and that we can talk to others easily. Like when I first moved to this country, like half of my life has been in India, half of my life here. That's the time when I first had a lot of struggles because I couldn't connect to people as well as I would to my own people. And so yeah, and you talked about that also, that part of the resilience journey was the sharing of your personal struggles with others.
Mhm.
And people come out sometimes, that's happened to me when I've shared personal struggles, people come out and say, oh, you're so brave for doing that. And it's like, this is part of my healing. It helps me, and it helps me, like what you said, when that shock becomes lesser, it's good for me. I can then take on the next challenge. But anyways, I really wanted to highlight this power of community that you talked about. And if you have any more things to say about it, please do, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, yeah. One of my themes this week actually is on the power of joy wanting a witness. And it's interesting. There's this study, I'm pretty sure it's from Yale, studied about 700 people ages 55 to 89. And they hooked up their brain to all these different sensors to watch them do 2 rounds of eating chocolate. And they had already said before the study that they like chocolate, so that came in as a like. They let the people eat chocolate by themselves and they watched how things fired. And then they brought in someone that they loved deeply, like a partner or a best friend, and they experienced chocolate with the person. And it was exponentially greater joy, like shared with a witness. Good feelings want to be shared. And it kind of came from the World Cup. Like, I don't care about Argentina or Spain winning. I don't care, but I'm a bandwagon fan. I love watching big sporting events, concerts, a big yoga class, all of these things that feel like a huge collective joy energy coming together. It's contagious. It's also, you don't ever just like, the soccer player didn't hit the goal or kick the goal and then just stand there and jump. He ran to his teammates. He hugs, he looks up in the stands because we are in need of belonging. Even the Surgeon General says that there's a greater risk of heart disease, 29% greater heart disease and 32% of stroke based on companionship and loneliness. If you report that you're lonelier and you're isolated, you have a way higher risk of those things, of heart disease and stroke. And I think that just speaks to us as humans. We are expanded based on what we're able to share. And the opposite is true for if you're sharing grief or the bad stuff, it's almost like other people get to take the load. Here's a big basket of worry and grief, but if other people are holding parts of it for you, it just separates itself. And so you're not holding it all on your shoulders anymore. The opposite happens with joy. So the more you share joy, the more people witness your joy, it's compounded and expanded into awesomeness. And so we're able to experience life better when we can be a witness to other people's joy and people witness our love too. And everyone knows, I hope most people know that even just a little bit of companionship, whether it's an animal, whether it's another human to share with, like, it is one of the big upsides of our current internet world is that there's someone for everyone to share and relate to, right? So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of finding belonging with people and using community as a way to uplift yourself, especially in those lower times.
That's awesome. And so, well, how I'd summarize what we talked about is that really, breath is medicine and belonging is medicine. And yeah, you are helping us be inspired through all of that. And so thank you, Katie, for talking to us. And I hope many people get to hear about all the inspiring things you do and what you've written about. And I hope many more people get to experience you in community. And you do retreats in India where you raise funds for orphan children. And I hope they come and check your work out. And really, you're our everyday neuroscientist. So it's been really great to have you here.
Thank you very much.